Sponsored by Catchpoint, the leader in digital experience management.
Hi, I'm Chris Lopez, Technical Marketing Engineer for Catchpoint. For today's tech tip, I want to provide a clear and precise description of each of our node types in the context of what data they can provide, how they're configured, and in what scenarios they're useful. As you know, Catchpoint offers synthetic monitoring, meaning that we can simulate user interactions with a host or a service and then tell you what areas of performance are flagging, like if your DNS takes too long to resolve, or if your website hangs when it loads, so your users stare at a blank page for 10 seconds. And our synthetic monitoring is powered by our different node types, but it's important to know which one corresponds to your situation. So over the course of this video, I'm going to go over how many different types of nodes that Catchpoint offers for synthetic testing. I'm going to go over how they're configured, and in what scenarios they would be best used in. And as always, it's important to keep in mind that the ideal digital experience monitor is one that provides multiple node types for its users to tailor to their use cases. All right, let's hop in. Here, I'm inside the software, and I'm planning out an instant synthetic test for my website. For any given situation, I'm going to pick one of the following types of nodes: backbone, last mile, wireless, enterprise, or cloud. There is a sixth type, employee endpoints, but those are a bit different, and I'll touch upon those towards the end. Like I mentioned before, these external nodes are acting like the user for any given transaction, and when I run a synthetic test, I'll be given a play-by-play of what it looks like when my users try to access a web page or application. And that's the significance behind these node types. Each variant examines a slightly different piece of the whole puzzle that will help you figure out what went wrong and why. So let's start this list with backbone nodes. Backbone nodes are deployed on high-speed lines and Tier 1 ISPs, and their goal is to provide an accurate representation of the end-user experience. So when you're running a test with a backbone node, you're going to see every hop involved in the critical path, right? Because of all the built-in redundancies of being in a Tier 1 ISP and the massive granularity of network data you're going to get as it's passed off from peer to peer, backbone nodes are generally the first node we'd recommend for any kind of test because they're so good at so many different use cases. And it's pretty straightforward. Do you want to check if your lower tier providers are having peering issues? Use a backbone node and pull more accurate BGP data. Do you want to check if your user base in California specifically can access your website with zero issues? Use a backbone node and make sure you run it from a local station. And if you're wondering whether or not your third-party requests are slowing down your website, use a backbone node, because those are going to give you an accurate representation of the overall experience rather than the result from an individual request, right? These third-party requests are spread across providers of all tiers. And in short, if you want to run a synthetic test, backbone is generally the first type of node you should reach for. Next up is last mile nodes. As you might have guessed, these are designed to monitor performance of a local ISP, right? The guys who provide the last mile of copper or fiber. Now, in this new distributed workforce, we all have a much closer relationship with our internet provider than we used to before. And a problem with a local ISP might mean people can't work or people otherwise can't access your services. So if you're running a test with a last mile node, you're more likely than not trying to resolve a local problem. And unlike backbone nodes, last mile nodes do not have their own built-in DNS resolvers, and they're often subject to the same problems that the end users are experiencing, but that's kind of the point. And while there's a smaller range of scenarios that this node type directly applies to, they're all still important ones. For example, if you want to know whether or not bad network performance is related to the end user, you'd use a last mile node. If you suspect your ISP is using some kind of paid prioritization or otherwise is throttling or blocking your traffic, you'd use a last mile node. If you want to compare traffic from different ISPs and see if one of them has a disruption or an outage, you'd use a last mile node. And if you just need to corroborate the last mile data from your backbone tests, you get the idea. As you might be able to tell, last mile nodes have a smaller scope than backbone nodes, but they're still a very powerful secondary node in their own right. Next up is wireless nodes. Much like last mile nodes, which are mini PCs with a Catchpoint agent deployed inside of the last mile, wireless nodes leverage 3G and 4G networks in order to tell you how your mobile users are doing. And since they're using the same network as the clients, they're subject to the same kind of disruptions that the clients are currently experiencing. So if you're running a test with a wireless node, you're most likely trying to troubleshoot some kind of geographic app issue, or maybe determine whether or not there's a carrier level policy that's affecting your mobile users' traffic. Next up are enterprise nodes. Enterprise nodes are installed inside of a client's network, and they can be deployed physically or virtually on either Windows or Linux. And these are more specialized nodes than the other type because the people who need to use them are, well, enterprises, who require dedicated resources for synthetic testing. An example here would be like a company that's internally fine-tuning an app, and they need to keep running synthetic tests before they release it to the public. And because these node types can run tests both behind and beyond the firewall, they're perfect for determining whether or not an issue is internal or external to their own network. Here's some example scenarios. If you're testing changes to a website and you want to monitor network and performance data from inside your own firewall, you'd use an enterprise node. If you want to monitor remote locations like call centers or branch offices, an enterprise node would be very valuable to your overall monitoring solution. Or if you just want to test the first mile and otherwise tell people, hey, it's not my network, enterprise node's quickly going to make your day. And on the subject of nodes that you deploy in your network, you'll find a lot of similarities to employee endpoints. These are Catchpoint agents that you can deploy locally on a Mac or a PC, and they'll feed real-time data to Catchpoint about your user's connectivity and network performance. You can use them both as the source of a test and also to tell you whether or not the user is experiencing hardware-related network issues like poor Wi-Fi signal or strength. Scenarios that this would be useful would be very similar to the last mile nodes, where you're determining how much of an issue is related to a user, except this time you have a node that is stationed directly in the user's computer, so it can tell you exactly what their experience is like. Finally, there's cloud nodes. As the title suggests, cloud nodes are based in the cloud and oftentimes on the same cloud as the applications that they're testing. As a result, if you're running a synthetic test with a cloud node, you're most likely trying to do one of the following things. You're trying to quickly determine whether or not your cloud-based application is available or up and running. You're going to test return traffic from the cloud to the client or test SLAs in the same stroke, or you're trying to run a high volume of tests in a short amount of time. Outside of those scenarios, cloud data isn't necessarily as useful as something like backbone data, mainly because it doesn't provide a lot of actionable intelligence about the end user experience, because it'll tell you whether or not it's available, but it won't tell you whether or not your users can reach it. Well, hopefully at this point you understand what each node type is and when you should use it, but let's recap the important stuff. Backbone nodes are basically the default node for synthetic tests because of how good they are at so many scenarios and how great they are for determining a problem's relationship to the end user experience. Last mile and wireless nodes are deployed when looking for local and municipal network issues. Enterprise nodes are dedicated Catchpoint agents you can use to verify network performance for both inside and outside a firewall, and employee endpoints are installed locally on a PC or a Mac that provide both a complete picture of what an end user's experience is like because it's installed on their laptop, but also provides live hardware data to tell you whether or not they're suffering poor Wi-Fi quality or Wi-Fi signal strength. And finally, cloud nodes are really great at determining whether your cloud-based application is up and running, testing return traffic against SLAs, or running a high volume of tests at once. And with that, we've covered all of Catchpoint's node types. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you next time.
Sponsored by Catchpoint, the leader in digital experience management.